On Tuesday, June 2nd, 6 U.S. states will have their primary elections, deciding which candidates move on to the November 3rd general election. Welcome to the 19th episode in our series, analyzing the 2026 primary elections for all 50 U.S. states. In today's episode, we'll be reviewing the state of Montana. They're a smaller state with a little over 1 million people. Currently, their state is represented by all Republicans in Congress and their governor as well. Although Montana's congressional delegation is the first state to not have any geriatrics in power. No one currently above the age of 64. Well done. Still, though, the majority of us should hopefully understand by now why Republicans in charge of government is not in our collective best interests. Yet, Democrats for decades have also done a poor job during their times in office, which has contributed to the rise of fascism. States held by Republicans are currently working overtime to bring back a new Jim Crow era. Voter suppression and rigging elections is their last way to maintain power. If elections are still held, this is our last nonviolent option to change things in this country. With everything as bleak as it is, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. In Montana, they have 2 House districts and 1 Senate seat up for election. We'll discuss the candidates who are putting in the work and showing evidence that they are worth voting for. If these approved candidates win their primary elections, they will be the ones to inspire more Americans to vote for them in the November election. With enough voters, we can make the elections in November too big to rig, even with the Republicans' new Jim Crow voter suppression and gerrymandering tactics. But first, let's discuss the primary process the candidates and voters must navigate to win. In Montana, their primary election process is a standard partisan type. The participation in the election is open, meaning any registered voter can decide which partisan ballot they wish to participate in. And no, you can't vote in both parties' primary. You can only vote in one. The win condition is plurality-based, meaning the candidate with the most votes wins. There won't be a runoff election. This is the only chance for the primary candidate to become the nominee. Unfortunately, we are well past the May 3rd deadline for new registrations, but that doesn't mean it's too late to vote if you're not registered. Montana also allows same-day voter registration. If you're not registered, as long as you go to those polls before noon, you can still register on election day and vote. But if you do sleep in, then it'll be too late. So don't sleep in. Voting is still important. Elections still decide which candidates end up in positions of power that make life and death decisions. Our current Congress, the 119th, has been a spineless and complicit group of failures. Not all of them, but the overwhelming majority of them in both parties. If any political party or movement wants to get more voters out on election day, there have to be candidates worth voting for. There are candidates running that will make the time to register and voting worth the effort. When candidates are campaigning, just saying you are not Donald Trump or not a Republican is not a campaign message. Millions of Americans, myself included, are tired of this political non-answer. Saying vague platitudes and cliches as so often said by spineless and corrupt Democrats is also unacceptable. Vague statements like, I support healthcare, but then have no other supporting details. Well, that's great, but what does that mean? Do they support fixing the system by implementing Medicare for all? Or is their support only for the for-profit corporate healthcare structure that harms millions of people every day? When I look for candidates to spotlight, these are the policies I look for on their campaign web pages. If a candidate doesn't have a policy page or a social media presence, that's the first and final red flag, and I move on to the next candidate to research. On the other hand, any candidate who has a decent policy page and has been endorsed by any one of the 10 groups listed will be considered for approval. The only exception is when there are several decent progressive candidates running in the same race that have also happened to have been endorsed by different groups that I trust. Then it becomes a comparison of who has a better policy page, better financing through small dollar donors, and who is providing evidence of being out and engaging with their local communities. Putting in the actual work of meeting your constituents and earning their votes is how grassroots progressive campaigns will win against the corrupt money interests that have poisoned our elections for decades. But those campaigns still need resources, and any additional visibility will help their message reach more potential voters. In all 3 of Montana's races, there is an inspiring candidate running in each. A link to their campaign website will be listed in the video description. Here are the candidates I hope the majority of Montana's voters will vote for on June 2nd. Starting in the 1st district, there are several candidates running for this seat. The only candidate in this race deserving of your vote is Russell Cleveland. He is endorsed by citizens impeachment and fighting for many of the policies to improve our lives. That is what makes Russell Cleveland the best candidate to win in November. In 2024, the Republican won this seat by about 8 points, 25,000 votes. In 2022, the race was closer, and the Republican only won by 3 points, around 8,000 votes. Had the Democratic candidate been more inspiring, they might have won. An additional advantage to whomever the Democratic nominee is that the Republican incumbent Ryan Zinke is not running for re-election. To give your district the best chance of electing a public servant in November, you need to support the best candidate in the primary. In Montana's 1st District, Russell Cleveland is that candidate worth supporting. Likewise, in the 2nd District, the approved candidate is Sam Lux, also endorsed by citizens impeachment and meets the policy requirements. Despite how good Sam Lux is as a candidate, this district just might be unwinnable. In 2024, the Republican earned 65.7% of the vote. To swing this district 30 or more points, it's not impossible, but it's going to be extremely difficult. Montana also has better voter turnout when compared with other states, so while it's still true there are tens of thousands of Montanans out there who don't vote regularly, there isn't a guarantee there is still enough to flip this 90,000 vote gap. Hopefully, more Republican voters are dissuaded from voting Republican again because of Trump's and MAGA's fascist actions, but many of those Republicans are also in their cult. If this district wants any chance of sending a public servant to Congress, voters in Montana's 2nd District vote for Sam Lux. For the U.S. Senate race, there are 5 candidates running. The entire approved Montana slate was almost going to be brought to you by citizens impeachment, as they have endorsed Alani Bankhead running for the U.S. Senate seat. However, when I compared her policy page to Michael Blackwolf's, I couldn't justify naming Alani as the approved candidate when Michael Blackwolf supports far more of the policies we need political leaders fighting for. The biggest difference for me when I was reviewing these websites, Alani's webpage didn't have a dedicated policy section. The best she could write in her core priorities is support for better access to healthcare, education, and mental health care. Now, maybe she has stated somewhere else in more clearer detail support for Medicare for all, but at this moment, I have not found that evidence. Comparing that now with the secular lefty approved candidate Michael Blackwolf, when reviewing his policy page, here is his statement on healthcare. In clear terms, Medicare for all. Healthcare is a right, and he supports healthcare coverage for every American. Then if you want to read more, he gives you that option. You scroll down, he gives you his stance on ending Citizens United, supporting tribal sovereignty, and protecting their food sovereignty. If you live in Montana, I highly recommend you checking out Michael Blackwolf's campaign page and learning more about all the other remaining policies he supports. This is a public servant who will need your vote on June 2nd to win the primary. When looking at the previous general election results, in 2024, the Republican defeated the Democratic incumbent by about 7 points, 45,000 votes. While disappointing the Democrat lost, it at least shows Montana is willing to elect a Democrat. His record, though, is kind of mixed. Not great, but better than the Republican who won. In 2020, it was the battle of the Steves. Republican incumbent Steve, who is running for re-election now, won with 55% of the vote, while Democratic Steve only earned the remaining 45%. If the U.S. Senate race is between 2 people again, that will give the Democrat the best chance of defeating this MAGA fascist. Currently, there is a Libertarian primary happening with 2 candidates running, and 1 independent candidate who will be in the general election, who's basically just another Libertarian option. Depending on the Democratic nominee, I don't know if these other options will work strategically with other candidates to consolidate around 1 to win, which would leave the decision up to the knowledge of the voters. Out of the 5 Democratic candidates, Michael Blackwolf has the best policy page and a record of leadership and community engagement. On June 2nd, if the voters of Montana want a senator who will be a public servant working to improve your lives, support and vote for Michael Blackwolf. And there you have it, folks, the secular lefty approved slate for Montana. Do you agree or disagree? Is there any important information you think I missed? Who will you be voting for? Let me know in the comments. For June 2nd, there are several states with their primary elections happening soon. Or possibly have already occurred by the time you watch this video. On May 19th, another slate of 6 states will vote. They are Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. If you know anyone in those states, please consider sending them a link to the analysis video on their primary. Let's send as many public servants to Congress as we can. Members of Congress who will serve the people, not corporate donors, war profiteers, and others in the Epstein class. A week later, on May 26th, Texas has their runoff election. These are their 4 candidates worth voting for. Afterwards, as mentioned earlier, Montana is not voting alone on June 2nd. They will be joined by 5 other states: California and Iowa, which have already been reviewed, along with New Jersey, New Mexico, and South Dakota, which will be the states covered in the next episodes. Stay tuned. Be sure you're subscribed and ring that bell to be notified of my newest videos. If you found anything I said in today's video useful, please give it a like and share it everywhere. Together, we can make Americans more educated, and hopefully that will result in better election outcomes. Until the next video, please consider checking out my other work on this channel. Any additional watch time and shares will help the channel reach more people and is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for listening. Take care.